After reviewing and greatly enjoying Dusk back in December last year, it left me wondering, despite its few flaws, could someone make a modern old school shooter that would beat it? It wasn't until I previewed a Medieval back in March this year that the answer to that question was yes, it certainly is. A Medieval blew me away and left me highly anticipating its full release and getting to play the final episode. That time has finally come, which presents the question of will the final episode be the epic conclusion we have all hoped for, or will the developer Indefatigable fall at the last hurdle? Let's find out. Before we get started, I would like to note that since previewing a Medieval back in March, my original graphics card stopped working. In order to get back up and operational as quickly as possible, my replacement graphics card isn't quite as powerful or modern as that of the original. Due to this, it is not as compatible with the Unreal 4 engine. Therefore, you will notice that I had to play a Medieval in low graphical settings, and the gameplay footage you are seeing will have drops in frame rates. So as you watch this, please do keep in mind frame rate drops and graphical settings are due to my hardware and not a fault of the developer. With that out of the way, let's get stuck in. A Medieval is an old school inspired first person shooter with influences from Quake, Heretic and Hexen. It is developed by Indefatigable and published by New Blood Interactive. It received a full release on June 20th, 2019 after spending 15 months in early access and is priced at €16.99. With breathtaking environments, 7 varied episodes, solid combat, creative weapons, excellent level design and enemy design, and absorbing atmosphere, a Medieval raises the bar to a whole new level at which all old school inspired FPS will be judged. In an ancient time, an evil force came to the sacred lands of the ancients, corrupting it and all that reside within them. Many heroes have tried to defeat this evil and return the sacred lands to their former glory, but none have been successful in doing so. You take on the role of the champion, the first mortal in centuries to overcome the trials of the Black Labyrinth and obtain the Holy Axe. The Axe of the Black Labyrinth. With the axe, the champion gains entry to the ancient sacred lands, where they must enter each and cleanse it of the evil. Only once the sacred lands have been cleansed will the champion gain access to the abyss, where they can find and challenge the evil face to face. Like with any old school style FPS, the plot is there simply as a setting and to give the player an objective and reason for being where they are, and that is exactly what the plot of a Medieval does. While basic, it is one of the more interesting of old school plots, creating a unique setting that isn't quite like any other, where the player is sent on an interdimensional journey through the lands of a variety of deities. For those looking for a bit more detail on the universe, a codex has been created in the main menu, covering the background of everything, the backstory, the weapons, the episodes and the enemies. It is quite an interesting read, but what makes it such an important element to add into the game is the fact that it creates a universe in a more detailed way that the plot alone could never do. So even those who enjoy a bit more plot or lore still have something to suit their tastes. But as always, it isn't the plot or lore that is the primary focus of a Medieval. It is, of course, the gameplay. The gameplay to a Medieval is exactly what you'd expect from a game that is inspired by the FPS games of the 90s. You must make your way through each of the levels, killing tons of enemies, finding secrets and keys in your efforts to find the exit to the next level across a series of episodes. There are a total of 7 episodes in a Medieval, each with the standard 3 levels and 1 boss level to complete. Each episode contains its own unique and distinctive theme, environments and enemies. The first episode is Astral Equinox. Here the player faces off against an order of knights who worship the moon and travel through a series of medieval style temples. The second episode is the domain of the Sentinels, where the player goes up against a xenophobic order of knights that have become corrupted by an evil force of Lovecraftian nature, as they journey through the now filthy and grimy fortresses and strongholds that the Sentinels once kept pristine. The third episode is the Sacred Path, a place where the ancients and their closest friends once embarked on a pilgrimage. Here the player is pitted against stone guardians and creatures created out of vines that have come alive due to the corruption of the evil on the vegetation. Here the player must make their way through a series of ancient stone ruins that wouldn't feel too out of place in an Indiana Jones adventure. The fourth episode is Solar Solstice, the domain of an order of knights who worship the sun, and who now have a hate towards the moon knights from the Astral Equinox. Here the player needs to find their way around medieval temples and towers. The fifth episode is The Forge. This domain belongs to the living machines and technology, where the player must face an array of brutal machines of corrupt design, across a vast and complex system of metallic structures filled with traps and lasers. The 6th episode is the Arcane Expanse, a mystical realm of magic where mages and wizards have long been experimenting with manipulating gravity, energy, reality, and even looking into other dimensions. Here the player goes toe to toe with these wielders of magic and their living crystal creations, across an array of strange and awe-inspiring design buildings that defy all reason and scientific laws. If I could compare it to anything else, it has a very unreal feel to it, like that of the Nali's floating city. The 7th and final episode is the Abyss, the domain of an evil force that has come and corrupted the lands of the ancients. Here everything is dark, twisted, and turns in unexpected manners, a world where nothing is ever what it seems. Here the champion must go up against the shadowy creatures of the evil and finally come face to face with the almighty evil itself. The episodes for the game are accessed through the Portal Hub in a similar fashion to that of Quake. You do have some freedom when it comes to deciding what order you complete the episodes in, but only for the later few. The first 2 episodes must be completed in their order, but episodes 3 to 6 can be completed in any order that the player wishes, the 7th episode opening upon all the others being complete. And just like the games that a medieval inspires from, each episode's start is a fresh beginning, where you only have the axe of the Black Labyrinth and you must find more weapons as you progress through the episode. The first 2 episodes act as a great introduction to a medieval, giving the player a gradual increase in difficulty and allowing them to come to grips with the workings of it. And I think that is why they left episodes 3 to 6 open to play at will after that, because the first 2 episodes are an introduction to the mechanics of the game, and from therein the player is free to take what they've learned and tackle the other episodes as they see fit. It is a subtle design choice, but one that is quite clever and effective, and in honesty, without playing the first 2 episodes first, the others will become a bit overwhelming as the difficulty does begin to increase quite a bit. As for the episodes themselves, they are all great in their own right. They each offer a unique experience with their own environments and enemies, with each episode getting a slight but balanced increase of difficulty to the last. If there was one episode that I would consider the best, it would be the Arcane Expanse. Not only does it create a very different atmosphere to that of the others, but the sheer creativity and general imagination that went into the very colourful design, both environmentally and in functionality, go a step above that of the others. It truly is a beautiful episode, and the mechanic of having floating water bubbles that you use to reach otherwise unreachable areas is just brilliant. It truly is the highlight of the entire game. As for the other side of things, I'd say the Forge is the worst of the 7 episodes. Not because it is boring or feels out of place, but rather because of how platform heavy it is and its fondness for traps. With the platforming, it can sometimes become very disorientating, where you can easily become confused with where you need to go, along with the slowing down the pace of the game. But with that said, it is still a damn fine episode, just one that isn't quite up to the standards of the rest. The 7th and long awaited final episode is brilliantly designed, and a very suitable end to the game. The developer has done a fantastic job of creating a place of utter darkness, evil, and corruption that really makes it feel like you're approaching the very heart of the evil you've been fighting all along. It is everything that I could have hoped for with the final episode. As a whole, the episodes of Medieval are fantastically designed. The idea of having 7 shorter episodes as opposed to 3 or 4 longer ones really works in the favour of the game. It allows the developer to create very different environments, all the while none of them losing their appeal due to stagnation. Overall, it makes the game an absolute treat to play from start to finish, as every episode is a completely different experience, while none of them wears out their welcome. And I really think that this may be the way forward for this style of shooter, as the consistent change is what really separates a Medieval from the rest. In my preview of Medieval back in March, I did criticise that the mid episodes were too easy, but they've since fixed this issue, with the episodes now having a higher number of enemies and a greater and much more balanced difficulty spike. Along with that, the enemies of the Sacred Path have also had a change, and one that feels a lot more fitting, swapping out the shadow creatures that are now in episode 7 for the creatures made up of vines. And it makes the already satisfying episodes ever more enjoyable for those looking for the challenge that wasn't previously there. In true old school FPS fashion, after completing a level you will be brought to the end of level statistics screen. Here your total kills, how many secrets you found, your completion time and the par completion will be total. The difference between the Medieval and those that it inspires from is that there are awards to be achieved in each of the levels. These awards include Speedrunner, Close Shave, Scholar, Killer, Collector, Explorer, Destroyer, Soul Sacrifice and Hardcore. Speedrunner is where you beat the level quicker than the par time. Close Shave is where you finish the level with 10 or less health. Scholar is where you find and read all the messages found scattered throughout a level. Killer is granted for killing all the enemies within a level. Collector is given for picking up every single pickup in the level. Explorer is for finding all the secrets in a level. Destroyer is for destroying every breakable object in a level. Soul Sacrifice is where you finish the level with Soul Mode active. and Hardcore is granted for obtaining at least 5 awards in a single level. These awards don't change the gameplay in any shape or form, but instead act as extra targets through a level. Each award is also an achievement, so if you want to unlock all the achievements in the game, you will need to get each of these awards at least once. They may not be to everyone's taste, but they do add an extra bit of content and further goals for those looking to 100% complete the game. Not to mention, give you bragging rights. As for the combat of the game, it is exactly everything you would hope for from an old school FPS. It is fast paced, adrenaline filled and has plenty of enemies for you to obliterate. But what kind of shooter would it be without an impressive array of weapons to cause such obliteration? A Medieval has a total of 7 weapons. The first is the Axe of the Black Labyrinth, which is a massive battle axe that hacks and chops enemies to pieces. The second weapon is the Staff of the Azure, which is a magical staff that shoots homing projectiles that target any nearby enemies. Then there's Whisper's Edge that fires a large projectile in the shape of its blade, slicing anything that stands in its path, and with a bit of practice and skill, can even take down several enemies at once. Voltride is an electrical trident that rapidly fires bolts of lightning out at enemies, electrocuting them. It is a relatively weak weapon on its own, but the real power of Voltride lays within its overkill. How this works is that when you kill an enemy with Voltride, they will stand in the spot of death, continuing to be electrocuted for a short duration. If you keep shooting at them during this period, it will cause an electrical overload, making them explode, and a chain lightning effect will strike any nearby enemies, blowing them up too. It is deliciously and gruesomely satisfying, to say the least. Next is the Celestial Claw, a magic staff that warps in random planets from the cosmos and shrinks them down to a manageable size, allowing for the wielder to hurtle them at their enemies, where they explode on impact. It is essentially a Medieval's rocket launcher, a very cool rocket launcher. Next is the Star of Torment, a mace that's head of spikes or crystal shards that are lunged at enemies with such force that it can pin enemies to anything they come in contact with. Think of the Penetrator from Fear, except it fires a lot of shards at once and has 10 times the power of force. It's bloody awesome. Finally is the Eternum, an indescribable mystical weapon of untold power that when fired launches a ball of energy that releases its energy upon all enemies within reach, disintegrating them entirely. This is basically a Medieval's very creative BFG 9000. But the fun with these weapons don't stop there. As you kill enemies, they will drop souls. Souls come in a variety of sizes, which are dependent on the size and difficulty of the enemy. There are also legendary souls scattered throughout the levels that completely fill up the meter instantly too. As you collect these souls, the soul meter will begin to fill up, and once full, you will be able to activate soul mode using the right mouse button, which unlocks each of the weapon's true power. Originally, the activation to soul mode was attached to the fire button by default, forcing you to use it as soon as you next fire your weapon. While this has been changed to alt fire by default, you can still change it back to the fire button in the options menu if you wish to do so. A message will appear in the options saying, "Like a true champion," meaning this is the way soul mode was originally intended to be. With the Axe of the Black Labyrinth, it turns the axe head into a propeller, destroying anything that stands in its path. It can also be used to propel you along while underwater too. The Azure Staff has a massive increase to its fire rate, essentially turning it into a magical machine gun, evaporating anything it kills. The projectile of Whisper's Edge becomes bigger and also bounces off walls, allowing for some very skilled and creative trickshot kills. Voltride fires a constant beam of lightning that causes the weapon's overkill to occur with every enemy killed. The Celestial Claw switches out planets for suns, which causes massive nuclear explosions upon collision. With the Star of Torment, the entire mace head is flung towards enemies and explodes upon contact, sending shards in all directions, impaling anything they come in contact with. And finally, the Eternum swaps out its ball of energy for a black hole, where anything within its pull, you included, is sucked in and obliterated in an instant. It isn't just the design and the looks of the weapons that make them so incredible, but their impact. Every weapon feels so solid to use, and you really get that sense that you have a weapon of utmost power in your hands. None of the weapons uses their usefulness either, even the weaker ones with the exception of the axe of course. The reason for this is that each weapon has its strengths against particular enemies, and in specific circumstances. For example, the Staff of the Azure is very useful in the Arcane Expanse against the mages who tend to dodge roll to the sides due to the incoming homing projectiles targeting them. Voltride is great for quickly getting rid of close together groups of weaker enemies, and Whisper's Edge is very effective in small tight corridors with 2 or 3 enemies. So no matter how far you progress in the game, pretty much every weapon still has its uses, and that really speaks for the attention to detail that the developer has gone to. Don't let the appearance of Medieval's weapons deter you, just because they look like melee weapons. They are as badass and as satisfying to use as any assault rifle, super shotgun and BFG 9000. Unlike in most FPS games where each weapon has a specific type of ammo or an arsenal of weapons that share certain ammo types, and Medieval uses mana as its ammunition, in a similar fashion to that of Heretic and Hexen. There are 4 types of mana which are separated by colour, these 4 colours being blue, green, orange and purple. Blue mana is for the Azur's Orb and Voltride, green is for Whisper's Edge and the Star of Torment, orange is for the Celestial Claw, and purple is for the Eternum. Each of the mana types is very well balanced, with each level containing just the right amount of each, where you don't get too much or too little. But at the same time you do need to ration your more powerful mana types, which are the orange and purple, a little bit. So you can't just go firing off your most powerful weapons willy-nilly. Having such good balance results in the player getting creative with the weapons and using them as they were always intended to be used, which works great for the game in the long run. It wouldn't be much of an FPS if the game didn't have any enemies to use those awesome weapons on though, would it? As previously stated, each of the episodes has their own unique set of enemies that you must battle your way through in order to reach the exit to the next level. For the first few episodes the enemies are pretty basic, often simply running straight towards you and hacking and slashing you to pieces. If not, they simply use a form of ranged attack. But as you progress through the episodes, the enemies begin to get a bit smarter and more difficult to deal with. Take Solar Solstice for example. At first glance you would think the enemy attack patterns would be similar to that of Astral Equinox, but that is not actually the case. The Sun Seekers have the ability to do a quick charging jump attack, and the Soul Legionnaires can block most of your basic attacks up front with their shields. Another example would be the Forge with the Overseers, who have a harpoon that they can hook and drag you up close to them where they slash you to pieces. And the Pain Masters unleash a rain of hot nails at you, killing you in mere seconds if you leave yourself out in the open. Having such a variety of enemies with different behaviours in each of the episodes results in the player needing to change their tactics to the combat in each one. Not only does it keep the combat refreshing, but adds an element of player skill to it also, with that amount of skill increasing depending on the difficulty setting of the game. It works wonders and never does the combat ever become stale, as each episode just feels like an absolute breath of fresh air. No matter whether it's the 2nd episode or the 7th, the combat never gets old, thanks to the fantastic weapons and their brilliant enemy design. The bosses are each unique and fitting, with the land and the inhabitants of it often being exceptionally larger and more fierce versions of what you've already faced. They are huge and extremely intimidating opponents, but only to look at. The bosses are the weakest point of a Medieval, often them being far too easy to beat even in the higher difficulty due to the sheer power of Soul Mode. Once you've Soul Mode charged up and ready to go, you can pretty much destroy any boss in seconds. Even the final boss of the game, who I won't show here for spoilers' sake, is easy to beat and doesn't pose much of a threat to you. Despite their ease in combat however, their physical intimidating design is nevertheless very fitting, making each feel like you're facing an actual boss enemy. Once you complete the campaign, you can access any of the levels as you see fit through the level select option in the main menu. How this works is that you'll be transported to the episode select hub, and when you walk through an episode portal, a menu will appear allowing you to select the level you want to play. When you highlight a level, it will show you the statistics for that level, including completion time, kills, and how many secrets that you found. This is a great addition to the game that allows players to go back and play through any of the levels they want, whether it's for the sheer enjoyment of it or to find any secrets you previously missed. Finally is the Hordes of Evil mode, which is essentially a Medieval's version of a survival mode. Upon selecting the mode from the main menu, you are brought to a portal hub with 3 portals. Each of these portals bring you to a different arena. One is based on the Sacred Path, one on Solar Solstice, and one on the Forge. The objective of this mode is to move around the arena collecting the arsenal of weapons and mana and simply lasting as long as you can while killing as many enemies as possible in the process. It is a fun little mode that puts everything you've learned to the test, along with getting a bit more extra mileage out of the game when you have done everything else. There currently isn't a leaderboard for the survival mode, but one is planned in the future I believe. Until then however, a thread has been made on the Steam forums for players to post screenshots of their impressive kill counts for bragging rights among the community, if you're into that sort of competitiveness that is. Overall, the gameplay to a Medieval is nothing short of excellent. The combat is solid, fast paced and adrenaline filled, the episodes each unique and exciting to experience, the weapons a thrill to use, and the enemies a joy to face. The bosses may be a bit too easy and the episode The Forge may not be nearly as good as the others, but those are minor issues that are quickly forgotten. Indefatigable have created a truly old school FPS experience, but have done so by merging the old and the new. A Medieval brings the very best of the old school FPS experience and gives it a beautiful modern coat of paint along with a few modern mechanic twists. It is a style of gameplay that both old school and new school FPS fans can enjoy, and that is something that makes a Medieval all the more unique, as it isn't every day an FPS will cater to both hardcore audiences of the genre. Anyone who knows the excellent level design of Quake will immediately be familiar with the workings of it in a medieval. How the level design of a medieval works is that every level essentially has a central hub, if you will. The rest of the level then moves away from this hub, often in multiple directions, some not available until you get a specific key. But what ends up happening is that each and every time you branch off from this central hub, you will always end up back at it to progress into the next branch, generally after finding a key. This allows the developer to very cleverly design a very big level around this hub, with each direction connecting back to it, and what you get is a constant flow with no backtracking. Now on paper this probably sounds pretty boring, but the way the levels are designed, they never feel like you're going around in what is essentially a circle. A perfect example of this is the first level of Astral Equinox. Upon entering the temple at the start, you will see in front of you a locked door that requires both a gold and silver key. This room acts as the central hub of the level. To the left and right of this room are two branching paths that lead to two very different areas of the map. But each of these two branching paths always end up bringing you straight back to the central hub, meaning you never have to go back the way you came in order to use the keys on the door. Not only does it help to keep the flow of the gameplay moving, but it also stops the level from becoming over complex where it is easy to become disorientated and lost. And that is the beauty of this form of level design. It results in the action never stopping and the pace of the game never slows down. And Indefatigable have perfected this format, at least for the most part in the medieval, turning an already excellent game into something incredible. The atmosphere to a medieval is incredible. Throughout the entire game, the atmosphere fits in perfectly with that of each episode. The amazing work of the soundtrack by Andrew Hulshult really brings the universe of a medieval to life, making it feel like a real and living place. Take the Arcane Expanse for example. The soundtrack fits perfectly with the environment and design of the level, with its slow yet mystifying feel that matches the dreamlike qualities of the episode. Or with Solar Solstice, where the soundtrack has a lightness and warmth in its tones to fit in with not just the brightness of the land and theme, but the sun nights themselves. And then the 7th episode, The Abyss, has a slow, more ambient track to it that symbolises the darkness and corruption of the place perfectly, making it feel you truly are in a place of utter evil. But never does the soundtrack ever lose that sense of grand adventure and fast-paced action either, giving a perfect blend of action and atmospheric ambience. Up until now, Hulshult has mostly been known for his work with more heavy metal music. Excellent heavy metal music, I might add. But a medieval proves that he's capable of doing all manners of musical genres, and doing so to fit in perfectly with the setting, theme and general atmosphere. And his work for a medieval, I believe, is his absolute best to date, as it brings not just a world but a whole universe to life. It is an atmosphere that I haven't experienced since the days of Unreal, and it is just as magical as Unreal's was all those years ago. It didn't take long before the question of which is better, Dusk or Medieval, to start popping up on the Steam forums of both games. And if I was to give my answer to that question, it would be a Medieval. Why is that, you might ask? Well, for a number of reasons. Dusk is a great game, don't get me wrong, but the creativity, imagination and general design, not to mention the bravery of a medieval, not only tries new things, but also executes them extremely well. Indefatigable took a risk going with a more medieval fantasy setting and an arsenal of weapons, and that doesn't include having its general design reminiscing that of Hexen and Heretic minus the puzzles, both which were not nearly as popular as that of those with guns. Indefatigable knew what they wanted to make and stuck with it valiantly, and it is an absolute treat that greatly separates a medieval from all the others out there now and that are yet to come. A medieval may have a medieval fantasy setting and weapons that fit that theme, but trust me, it is as badass, gruesome, action-packed and just plain fun as any Doom, Quake or Dusk. Its combat is rock solid, its level design fluent, its weapons, enemy design and episodes are creative and full of imagination, and its atmosphere is pure and utter magic. A medieval has set the new standard at which all future old school inspired FPS games will now be judged by, and with that I give a medieval a 9 out of 10. A medieval isn't just a rock solid old school inspired first person shooter, it is a game with which a fascinating universe has been born. A universe with endless possibilities. A universe that I cannot wait to explore and see more of.